Go to geist.buzzsprout.com to support our show. It keeps our episodes ad-free, and support starts as little as $1 a month. And when you have a sec, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thank you from the bottom of our dark little hearts. They say space is silent, infinite, empty. But what if that silence is a lie? For centuries, we've looked to the stars, hoping to find answers. Signals, messages, proof that we're not alone. And in that silence, we've heard whispers. Stories of lights in the sky that don't belong. Encounters too strange to explain. Secrets buried in plain sight. Are we being watched? Visited? Studied? Are we the anomaly? Something they're trying to understand. Whatever is out there, it's closer than we think. Welcome to the world beyond the veil. This is Geist.
Now, Leslie was a student of mine. I was teaching Tai Chi. It was a lucky thing because the first time I ever laid eyes on Leslie, it was just, I kind of knew. I just kind of knew there was some connection there. Then she ended up becoming a patient of mine, and things just went on from there. So
and we were friends for years.
We were friends for a long time.
And then got together finally.
Right.
You know?
And so we've been married now for 28 years. So guess what? There must be some type of, long-term connection. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Stephen and Leslie Shaw have lived through experiences most of us can't begin to understand. In their book, Who They Are and What They Are Up To, they explore their personal encounters, their theories, and their experiences that have shaped their lives in ways they could have never predicted.
It was a touchy subject for me because many people kind of think that you're making stuff up. We had these events that happened that all 5 members of my family experienced. So, I told her these things, and of course, she, maybe believed me, like, unless you experience things directly, you can never really be sure.
Yeah.
But
seeing is believing.
And yeah, right.
So many things had happened to Stephen then, and I was 45 years old. I had seen nothing. And then finally, there it was. We finally saw it, and pretty much decided to start writing it when I saw my first UFO.
We were both searching for answers, and so that's really kind of the nuts and bolts of it. Mm-hmm. And we really wanted to get across what we had found that really actually made a lot of sense, a lot of common sense, especially from my experiences. So that's why we wrote the book. It was mostly for partly closure on our side, but also letting people know what we're really seeing, what's going on.
We were watching every UFO program in the world, and I would see these people looking up at the sky going, who are they? What do they want? This poor person is being abducted regularly and doesn't understand what's happening to him. And we had a theory. I thought, well, we should tell our theory. Maybe it'll help these people, understand what's happening to them.
The UFO community is, the way I see it, is kind of a little divided, from the standpoint that we'll hear people that are talking about, oh, they're all interdimensionals and they're all like lovey-dovey and trying to help us and this kind of stuff. And the others that, have the other viewpoint that they're here to take us over, that kind of stuff. And a lot of disinformation. And I think a lot of it is purposeful.
Well, the community they're a fun bunch of people, actually. When we go to events, they're a nice group, of people, and a lot of camaraderie and support. When we did the show in Big Bear, for instance, we got a lot of funny looks, like people laughing, twittering behind their hands at us,
Whatever. But we've also met people too that say they can speak 1,000 different intergalactic languages because they have this stone they're carrying around their neck. And we've met some really, what I call kind of like the Looney Tunes.
Well, Stephen, when I met him, he had all these experiences already in his life, and I nothing had ever happened to me, so. I believed him, but when you can only believe like 98% if you've never seen it for yourself. There's always that teeny little kernel of doubt, and until you see it yourself, which I finally did.
No, I told her about our family spirit guide called Old Legley that had been with the family for about 3 or 4 generations. So I grew up in a house where these things were just kind of taken for granted that we had this entity called Oglegli, or we had these interactions. And so I didn't tell my friends at school about Oglegli. I mean, and we didn't talk about it that much with our family, only at certain times when things were happening. It's like, say, Oglegli always appears the same way, tall, skinny. Myself, I saw him as Oglegli as a tall, blue-white entity. All the women in the family for 4 generations at least have been automatic writers. It came through, I believe, in automatic writing. I believe it was my great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother that asked, what the entity's name was. It was Oglegli, which in Tunisian means my friend.
Through their research, Leslie and Stephen have developed a unique abduction criteria, which is also outlined in their book. It points out that many abductions involve individuals that are often Caucasian, that green-eyed people are a preference, that more frequently than not these abductions occur within families, and that these families are frequently visited by the same entity for years, just to name a few. They have also created a UFO identification criteria that outlines characteristics of unidentified flying objects.
The UFO phenomenon, especially the abduction phenomenon, it's remarkably similar from one case to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And when I hear someone telling a story that deviates a great deal from that almost always the same story, then I question whether they're telling me the truth. Yeah, there are some observable characteristics that define UFO activity. One of them is supersonic speed. And frequently they take off at that speed right away. In other words, they're not ramping up to a speed, they're instantly going at that speed. Another one is the transmedium travel, where they can go from space to air to ocean, from ocean to air to space again, with ease, no problem. Sharp, angular, full-speed turn. They can make these full-speed angular turns. Like when we turn an aircraft around, we have to bank it around in a big U shape, right? But when these turn, they're making V turns at full speed, frequently zigzagging across the sky. UFOs are almost always silent. That's another way I know if maybe they're seeing something that's an experimental plane of ours, say, if it's making a loud noise. They're almost always silent, and the exception seems to be that sometimes people hear a low-frequency hum that's more felt than heard. Otherwise, they make no sound at all. They don't have wings or propellers. People have described them disappearing right in front of them. And I don't know for a fact if they're disappearing or if they just hit the gas and moved at 72,000 miles an hour faster than the person can see, you know. But they have been known to cloak. And right on, sometimes our best equipment, the military equipment, will see them just disappear. Frequently, UFOs, like big ones, will break apart and shoot off in different directions, and then frequently link back up again, and then fly as one after that. Almost like they're somehow energetically linked, because when they move in formation, they are locked together, unlike our planes that drift slightly, you know. In the book, I focused on, especially on mass sightings. When one person tells you they're sighting, they could be lying or mistaken. When 300 people call the cops and say, "There's a UFO in my backyard," the thing I'm thinking of specifically, this was along Lake Michigan, this 300 people called the cops, and then the cops called the National Weather Station, was right on the lake. And this guy at the weather station turned the radars to where this was happening, and he picked up UFOs going 72,000 miles an hour on National Weather Service radar. There's several UFO hotspot areas that are mystified as to why. The Hudson Valley is a good example. Hudson Valley of New York. It's just a UFO hotbed and an abduction hotbed. Sometimes people will remember little dribs and drabs of their abductions, and sometimes people remember nothing, but they'll start having terrifying nightmares about it, but will almost never be able to remember the face of their abductor. And I believe they tamper with memory, but it's always with the shimmery quality to it. And I think of that as when the family describes the shimmery quality to memory, I think that's evidence of their memory tampering. And 9 out of 10 are Caucasian. And for years, when we were doing our research, talking to different people who'd been abducted, I kept hearing the same thing, that the person that was abducted is also a psychic healer, or this person that was abducted is also a medium, or this person that was abducted is psychic in some other way. The government was doing MRI PET scans of brains of abductees and discovered that they have the same kind of brains as people with ESP and remote viewers. So there is definitely a psychic connection to the phenomenon. We found that they both prey on the family and protect the family. Sort of like you're protecting your prize cow, you know, that's your need for milk or something. And yet they're taking the family to take genetic material. That's what they do. They take humans, and from men they take sperm, and from women they take eggs. Frequently you'll hear the anal probe thing. The anal probe thing is always on men, and I think they're accessing the prostate directly. And that's one of the signatures of the abduction phenomenon, is this missing time thing. People will see something strange, sometimes even something terrifying, and then they'll black out. The first time we had any inkling of what we were really dealing with was we hadn't done the research yet. We didn't realize that this blacking out and time missing thing was the signature of the abduction phenomenon.
Stephen is about to share his personal experiences with alien abduction. While they may sound unbelievable to some, are undeniable to him.
I have missing time in my life for sure. My brother did for sure. Different members in the family bloodline for sure. But as far as like my remembering any dribs and drabs, I honestly, I don't know how many times I've been taken, but I do know I've been taken. And you know, throughout my life, I've had weirdisms. Well, my first, when I was 3, I would be visited when I was 3 years old by this invisible two-legged being that would playfully jump on my stomach and my chest in the middle of the night. This was two-legged and it was invisible. I couldn't see it, but it was non-menacing. So that would happen several times. When I was 9, I heard this unusual sound that I didn't recognize, and I knew it wasn't the dog, so I got out of my bunk bed and I was walking down the hallway, and there was a little light on in the kitchen, and so I could see where I was going, but I was really scared. And so I was like kind of terrified, and I was walking down there, and then I just blacked out. A few hours later, I ended up back in my bed with no memory of what happened in between. And then when I saw my first UFO was when I was 12. This was the classic orange globe. You know, I was looking at it through the front door, and I said, "Is that a plane? Is that a helicopter?" But it wasn't. It was just this bright orange globe that was floating horizontally from south to north, and at a kind of a slow pace, and then it kind of stopped. Called Griffith Park Observatory the next day and said, "Well, you know, we don't have our telescopes pointed in that direction," so they had no knowledge of that. We were building a house up in the foothills of the Sierras in Sonora, California, which beautiful country with cedars and oaks and pines. And we had a creek on the property. My mom and my brother were living up there, and my dad, myself, and my sister were in Woodland Hills, California, running the business.
But Philip started school early up in Sonora, so that separated the family for a few weeks.
One of the nights, I was awakened by this whizzing sound in the air. I looked out my bedroom door, and it was like there was a light on in the kitchen, and I just thought, well, was it like a bug or something like that? And I went back to bed. And then my bed was pushed twice, kind of gently from the base of the bed. And I thought, well, you know, growing up in Southern California, maybe it was a miniature earthquake, right? And then the bed was pushed again, a little stronger. And then the third time was a lot stronger.
Then the entity made contact.
I got tapped on my right deltoid. I got tap, tap, tap. It's like somebody's tapping you with an index finger. Scared and annoyed to say, is somebody playing a joke on me? And so I whirled over and said, "What?" And I saw like this shimmery thing in front of me, and then I blacked out. You know, I woke up probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, just like nothing had happened. You know, I talked to my dad, my sister, to my brother, and my mom are at the other house. We just talked about it at breakfast time. The following night, I decided I'm not going to be sleeping in that bedroom. Decided to sleep on the couch in the living room in my clothes, my work clothes. So I woke up about 5:30 in the morning. It was dark, so I wasn't going to get up, but I was awake. That's the important distinction. I was not in a dream state. There was the front door, and about 25 feet behind me. And this entity, 6.5 foot tall and skinny, blue-white, came from behind me and walked the distance of about 25 feet in about 1.5 to 2 seconds. The whole room was filled with blue-white, intense blue-white light. It stopped on my right-hand side, and it basically paralyzed my body, but I could not move. So this being, this entity, bent down and said into my ear, not in my head, but in my ear said, "Hi, Steve." In kind of a whisper, and I'm trying to look at it in the face. And after about 5 seconds of that, it bent back up and it left out the same way it came. Six hours later, my dad and I were getting hungry for lunch. So 11:30 in the morning, I decided to I'll reach into my, get my whatever change I have, whatever. And so I pulled the change out of my right-hand side pocket, and all the coins were magnetized. Dad could pick them up by the face of the coin, by the edge. It didn't matter. I could do the same thing. I don't know what type of force that was, but it was like you could pick them up, they would stick. It wasn't like any type of a glue or anything like that. It was like you could pick them up, you could separate them. I also happened to have a couple of nails, some 6-penny nails in my pocket from the day before, and of course those were all magnetic.
One night, between the two houses, the entire family experienced a phenomenon.
I gave my dad this little book. I gave it to him at 9 o'clock at night, and then he came back into my room about 9:30, and with this perplexed look on his face. And he said, "Stephen, I'm hearing a silver bell." And I said, "What?" And so he said, "I'm hearing a silver bell by the fireplace." And so I went into the living room, and sure enough, there's this just like a silver bell sounds. It's very distinctive, it's a one-of-a-kind sound. It was coming from the wall, inside the 2x4 wall. And so my dad and I, we looked up the flue, looked up the chimney, didn't know what to think. Then we got my sister. And so we all heard it, went on for a good 10 minutes, and then it stopped. Well, the next morning, we had a tradition of always calling my mom in the morning up at the Sonora house that we're building. My mom said to my dad, "The funniest thing happened last night, Jeffrey. At 9 o'clock at night, I heard this bell ringing, and I thought it was the phone." And so she picked up the phone, and there was this voice, a male's voice, a deep voice. And so I got my brother on the phone, and he said, "Mom definitely picked up the phone, and she was trying to have a conversation with somebody." And then she put it down, and she had this kind of confused look on her face. So at the exact same time that we were hearing the silver bell in the wall at the Fallbrook house, my mom heard a bell ring, and she picked up the phone at the exact same time. Okay, this is 5 people experiencing the same thing. Okay, but in 2 different locations. And I just still don't know how to explain that.
Then, the final night.
This was like the last thing that had happened, the 5th night of weird things happening. The last night was when my dad saw this wall of blue-white light that was coming out of my room, out of my bedroom. So he got out of bed, and he was going to walk down the hallway to my room, and this voice in his head said, "There's nothing to see here, Jeffrey. Everything's okay. Just go back to sleep." And that's exactly what he did.
Leslie explains Philip's experiences, which is Stephen's younger brother.
Philip had his own cluster of 3. He was 16 years old, and he was at the Sonora house. And in the middle of the night, he was awakened by 2 bright white lights shining in his bedroom window. And his bedroom faced out over a drop-off, so this craft or whatever would have had to been up about 30 feet in the air. And there was nothing back there. There was no woods, there was no road or anything. It was just a hillside with trees. And so he was staring at it, trying to figure out what it was, and then he blacks out and wakes up in his bed the next morning.
The next night.
he was laying down in bed to go to sleep, and he heard a scrabbling sound on the floor next to him. He thought, oh, it's one of the cats. And he reached down to pet the cat, and instead a hand grabbed his wrist. And he felt this thrill of terror and adrenaline, but then instantly blacked out. And wakes up in his bed the next morning.
And again.
And then the third night, he woke to some noise, and he looked over at his bedroom doorway, and there was the tall gray alien. 6.5 feet tall, he said, very skinny, all gray with the big black eyes, the typical gray alien.
They realized that Oglekli may not have been the family's spirit guide, but something completely different.
We realized that Oglekli is a gray, and that he's the family's handler, so to speak. He slept in the closet as a child for 2 years, and Stephen asked him why, and he said, I'm afraid of the little men that come at night.
I was awakened one night when I was sleeping in the bunk bed, on the top of the bunk bed, and Philip was on the bottom. And I was awakened by what I can only describe as shimmery garden gnomes. There was 4 or 5 of them. They appeared to be male, about a foot to 1.5 feet tall. They literally looked like garden gnomes, but shimmery, and they were walking into my bedroom. And I looked at them. I tried to, I was trying to, clear my eyes, but they were there, and I just rolled over because I was scared, right?
Once again, Stephen is unable to recall what happened.
Well, I saw them once. So when my brother started sleeping in the closet, and he told me about being afraid of the little men that come at night, I believed him. I didn't even tell my mom and my dad that he was sleeping in the closet because he was embarrassed. It's like, what do you, he's my little brother. My sister wanted to have nothing to do with it. She was like completely like putting her, burying her head in the sand, just like she didn't know what was going on, but she knew things were going on, and she just did not want to deal with it. I had asked my brother about his earlier life, about when he was younger, and on a couple different occasions he said, Stephen, I just don't remember. I just don't remember my early life. I just have this like this blank. I just don't know.
When we think about encounters with the unknown, what we rarely discuss is the trauma these experiences can leave behind. For those that have had close encounters, the emotional and psychological toll can be overwhelming. The fear, confusion, and isolation can affect every aspect of their lives, relationships, careers, and even their sense of self. People are quick to laugh rather than lend an ear, and the results can be devastating.
Poor Philip did not handle it as well as Stephen did. He was blocking a lot of it out. But his brother, had the trauma in early life. He was a brilliant man, a genius, really. But he wasn't emotionally well balanced, it seemed. He never had a long-term relationship, and he became miserly and hermit-like as he grew older. He lost his father. It seemed like that was the final thing that unbalanced his mind.
It was the catalyst.
Then it was about 4 months later, on his birthday, he killed his cats, his mother, and then himself with a shotgun. He really knocked us down for quite some time. And
2017 was a terrible year for us. It almost actually killed me. Almost killed me.
Continuing on in their research was important. And little did Leslie know she was about to experience it firsthand.
It was January of 2005. I was 45 years old at this point. And we were driving home from an art meeting that we used to go to in the evenings once a month. And we're driving through Joshua Tree toward our Yucca Valley home. And it was while we were in Joshua Tree, and I was driving and he was sitting in the passenger seat, and we could both see in front of us through the windshield in the distance a white light, a round white light. And I thought to myself, maybe it's a plane flying into Palm Springs Airport or something. But as we stared at it, it didn't have the running lights like planes have, the little side blinky lights, and it didn't behave like a plane. And then it stopped in front of us, right over the highway ahead of us, and it got brighter and brighter and brighter. And I don't know if it was just because we were driving towards it or if it was also coming towards us. And then it took off north at this instantaneous, tremendous speed. It was so fast that visually it streaked into a line that collapsed on itself, and it was just gone in a quarter of a second. I clicked over at that moment from not being 100% sure that, it was real, and to being fully believing everything Steve told me from then on. That little kernel of doubt was poof gone after that.
Then, for a second time,
we had moved from Yucca Valley down to DHS, which is a lower desert, and it was only a few days after we moved in. And we're in a tiny home community, and we had a high fence, for privacy, and we only had a tiny little triangle of a backyard sky view. We looked up, and there was this, again, a round white light making a big arch in the sky towards us, and it got brighter and brighter as it got closer. And then it started making these angular moves, like it zigzagged across the sky at full speed. And then it kind of dropped a little bit, and then again shot off at thousands of miles an hour to the north.
It was the timing was so odd. We had just moved from like some Yucca Valley down to Desert Hot Springs, and we just happened to go out at nighttime. It was just there, soundless, and it was bright white, and it was definitely saucer shaped. For me, it was like saying, okay, we know where you are, Stephen, and we're just checking up to say hi. I'm still getting visitations to this day, weird things that are happening to me here. So they know where we live.
One day while at work, Stephen sustained a horrific injury, and it required emergency surgery. This event would later serve to validate the experiences he had when he was younger.
When I almost lost the use of my right arm, September 25th, 2013, on the military base, the 20 Palms military base. But when they did the x-rays, they did a 2-view x-ray, and one of the x-rays showed that it looked like a piece of rice that was in the mid part of my deltoid on my right side. And it was metallic, but they couldn't explain what it was. I just looked at it, and the x-ray tech couldn't explain it. Said, well, it's nowhere close to where your bone was broken. That went back to the whole thing that was happening in 1979. The entity that tapped on my deltoid, my right deltoid 3 times, the spot that it tapped was the exact spot where the that little tracking device was seen on the x-ray. And I had no clue that it was even there because, it happened when I was 18 and I had my injury when I was 53.
After Stephen's surgery, the doctors reviewed his x-rays to show him what had been done. But when they looked closely, the small rice-shaped object that had been there before was gone.
And during the surgery, they must have taken it out.
Well, the thing is, we do have the x-ray.
Well, we have the X that shows the X-ray. Yeah. It's a well-documented phenomenon that it happens. I met a ufologist one time who had a petri dish full of these little tracking devices that had been taken out of people. they're beyond our technology. And if anybody's looking for proof of the abduction phenomenon, it's right there.
Sometimes the stories we hear are so unbelievable, they seem impossible. But whether or not we believe them doesn't change the fact that they happened. And that's all that matters to me. Because the truth is, belief isn't a requirement to hear someone's story. What matters is that we listen, and we honor these experiences that shape who we are.
I'm not afraid of looking at the sky. You know, I'm just curious. Quite frankly, I'm just curious.
That is the first thought in my mind when I walk outside and look up at the sky. Is there a UFO out there tonight?
Yeah, basically.
A very special thanks to Stephen and Leslie Shaw for sharing their story. And if you'd like to dig a little deeper, who they are and what they are up to explores their theories and experiences and is available for you to read. Do you have a story you've been hiding? Submit it to us at hello.geist.podcast@gmail.com. Geist is written and edited by Danielle Matar. Original music and FX by Beau Jensen. Mixing and sound by Adam Esker. Geist's logo is by Carruthers. Follow us on all social media platforms at Geist_podcast. And again, if you'd like to support our show, please visit geist.buzzsprout.com. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, sleep tight.